today and have some discussion around this a little bit more. So we had, oh, Brian, did I plug the thing back in?
Is it on?
Yes, I checked it twice. Checked it.
Try it without the battery.
Try it though. I don't know, Mike might have taken the battery out. Oh, there we go. Now I'm on. Okay, I'm just going the wrong direction. Okay, thanks. I unplugged it and I think I just did push it back in far enough. All right, so at the beginning of this, I planned on doing, there's 5 lessons there, and the plan was just to work through each one. Okay, so the first lesson, Introduction to Definitions, this is kind of week 3 on that. This will probably be the last week. Now, the second one, the fear of the Lord, I gave an assignment the last 2 weeks to the class to read through the book of Proverbs in a short amount of time as you are able, but at least through the week. So was anybody able to accomplish that last week? Anyone read through the book of Proverbs last week? We got a couple. Mild, Nellie, thanks for being honest. All right. You didn't know about it? That's not an excuse. You could have asked one of your classmates what the assignment was.
You sound like a senator.
Yeah, so next week I won't be here. The week after, likely the 16th, I won't be teaching Sunday school. So for July 23rd, Lord willing, we will talk about Proverbs. So you have 3 weeks to read through the book of Proverbs. Have someone read it to you if you want. Listen to it on tape, or if you still have cassette tape, books on tape. Do something, but try to read through the book of Proverbs, the entire book, and try to do it in as short amount of time as you can. Now you have 3 weeks. You should be able to read through it 3 times if you're an A student. Joanne, if you're an A student, you can read through it 3 times.
I read very slowly, try to process it.
Yep. Yeah, read through it as quickly as you can.
Okay.
That's the goal. Then I have the 3 other ones: knowing God, world order, and imagination. So we'll work through each of these. But for 3 weeks from now, try to read through the book of Proverbs, and we'll talk about that next time. So we talked about some key terms last Sunday, or the Sunday before, I guess. The first Sunday, and these are some of the key terms in this discussion. So the word worldview. And I'm being very, what do I want to say? Simple, almost too simple. So if you go out and Google worldview, you're going to get much more technical definitions than what I have here. We'll actually change this definition as we go through the study. I plan on doing that, making it precise or more accurate. And basically, and we're going to talk about the term worldview today in more detail. But this is what we started with. All the beliefs one has about the perceived world. And we'll talk about this one in more detail. But worldview in general is everything that you believe to be true about the world. Everything is worldview. And so a Christian worldview, which is what we're trying to get at in the class, is everything a Christian believes about everything that allows us to function in the world, allows us to live in the world. And so last week what we did is we juxtaposed a couple cultures to try to identify different worldviews, one that was influenced by Christian worldview and one that was not. Now this is closely tied to the word culture. And there are different definitions of culture, and most of them are not good definitions. I mean, they're just poor. But the culture, the idea of a culture is the realization of worldview, or there's a real theological definition for you. But normally we talk about folk culture, high culture, and popular culture as 3 different kinds. And the main definition of culture is really the first, the localized form of culture based on long-standing regional traditions and usually by a group of people who all speak one language, okay, speak the same language. I don't have language up there, but it's part of it. So when you have a group of people who live in one place all together, speak the same language, normally have the same religion, that's also part of this. Folk culture arrives out of that. So this is culture of the people. And last week we looked at some German folk culture from the 1500s, and we juxtaposed that with Papua New Guinea culture from the 21st century, and we juxtaposed the two folk cultures. High culture is artistic, entertainment, a technical word in this case, material artifacts associated with a society. So material artifacts, you're talking about art and architecture and all of those kinds of things. And then popular culture, which is generally mass-produced for the lowest common denominator. Easily accessible in all ways. So these are the ideas of culture. So worldview exists, it's our belief system, it's all in our mind, so to speak, okay? But it works its way out in culture. It works its way out where we can see it in a people's culture, and so by studying their culture, we have an idea of what the ideas are behind it. And that's how we study worldview, generally speaking, through the culture. So here's a little bit more about worldview, and then we'll get into an example of worldview, which is in an article in this magazine. I changed the definition a little bit. Worldview, in this definition, is all the beliefs that one has that affects how one lives in the perceived world. And it's all of your beliefs. Do you believe that God exists, or do you believe that there is no God? Okay, that's just one belief. But these beliefs don't have to be doctrinal beliefs. When I use the word beliefs, I think some people think, oh, here's our doctrinal statement, and this is what we believe. Okay, I'm not talking about a creed or a doctrinal statement. I'm talking about everything that we believe to be true about reality. We believe that objects don't randomly fall up, right? You don't tie things down. You're never afraid that when you walk outside, you might fall up into a tree, right? How many of you are afraid that's going to happen? You wear heavy shoes to keep you down? No, because gravity has always been present in your life since you were born. And so even if you don't understand gravity, which most people don't, even scientists don't, then you still live your life as if gravity is true. You believe it's true for the sake of how you live, how you plant a garden, how you drive your car. You believe, and probably all of us in here do, that the vast majority of people you meet in a given day are not going to harm you. How many of you go into Hy-Vee and kind of check it out first? Because you think that everyone in there could rob you at any point in time. Right? Is your purse secure? Do you got your buck knife and your other self-protection, your mace and everything else, easily at hand? Because that cashier looks a little iffy today. Looks like she might be having a bad day. She might take it off on you, right? But we don't live our lives that way. Now, you might go to certain places, like I used to work in South Minneapolis, third shift, and then you might say, well, okay, maybe my beliefs changed about the nature of humanity when I'm in South Minneapolis working third shift. But for most of us, we don't live that way. These are all beliefs in our mind that show the way that we live. Do you take the keys out of your car when you park it at your house? Okay, do you lock your doors when you go into your house? Things like that. Those are all based on whether you behave that way or you don't. It's all based on what you believe. And you might recognize those beliefs and you might not. But our worldview encompasses everything. Now you put a bunch of people together who have a very similar worldview, because they're all in one location, speak the same language, and have the same religion, and now you have culture. Okay, and culture manifests that worldview. So I hope this clarifies a little bit more about what we're talking about worldview and what we're talking about culture. Does this help? Oh, nothing. Pastor's like, phew, I didn't understand anything after last week. Okay. All right, so we're going to talk about this worldview as an example. All right, so like I mentioned, I'm just going to give the whatever you call it here, reference. But this magazine, Acts and Facts, is from the Institute for Creation Research, which is, you have Answers in Genesis, and then you have ICR. This is commonly referred to as ICR. They have similar motives, but they have similar different methods about how they talk about creation and scientific research as it pertains to creation. But they have a lot of very high qualified scientists who work for them. Oh, by the way, this is an old copy, but last October, Tom Meyer was listed, I think, somewhere. Anyway, oh no, he was in the other one. Never mind. He was in the other magazine I looked at over the weekend. Okay, so we have, so we're going to take a look at this. The name of the article is Natural Selection's Death-Driven Worldview. I'm missing a quotation mark. The author is Randy Gugliuzza. I assuming I'm pronouncing it correctly. And if he ever listens to this, I'm sure he'll be forgiving. But this is, he's the author. He's got a ton of credentials. And so you'll notice right away that he says natural selections apostrophe, death-driven worldview. So, okay, so I have to stop just for a second and say, small caveat. All right, people have worldviews. Things don't have worldviews. All right, natural selection doesn't have a worldview. But his point is, he's looking at this culture, we almost call it a culture of death in America today. Why are people, or in Canada too for that matter, why are people so eager to have people die? Okay, so whether it's abortion or it is it's euthanasia or it's Canada's MAID law, M-A-I-D, aid in dying, medical aid in dying, I think is the acronym. So for any reason, you can go and have assistance killing yourself, which in the old days you didn't need someone to do that for you, just did it yourself. But anyway, Canada's got a whole government-funded program for you on that. So he's asking the question, why is this an issue? So I've got some quotes from him here. This is kind of the thesis to his essay. It's not a terribly long essay, but since you don't have it in front of you. This is what Dr. Randy Gugliuzza is going to be a tough one to say repeatedly. But Gugliuzza is saying this, according to Darwin, so he's referencing Darwin, death, that's the subject, acts is the verb, death acts as the mechanism that adapts populations of organisms to their environments. So death has a positive role to play in Darwin's theory of natural selection. So this is what he's going to argue. He's going to say, according to Darwin, death is a good thing. And it's, so we're evaluating that statement. Is death a good thing, right? From a biblical perspective. Now remember, it's a worldview is all of your beliefs. So if you believe that death is a good thing, if a culture believes that death is a good thing, then that's going if a group of people believe that death is a good thing, they believe that statement to be true, how does it work its way out in the culture? And there's so many examples. I'm just going to try to stick to his, but I'm going to show you an example if we get there. I think we will. All right, so he quotes directly from Darwin's Origin of Species. Has anybody actually read Darwin's Origin of Species? Kind of? All right. So our oldest daughter, Sophia, was very much interested in natural history when she was little, and so she and I read it together because we would go to natural history museums on vacation and stuff like that. And I wanted her to understand the difference in the way of thinking and fact versus interpretation of fact. Okay, that's very important. But, so she and I read Origin of Species, and then we were in, okay, this is a side note, but I'll brag on my daughter for a little bit. So we're in, I think it was San Diego or something. We were in the Natural History Museum somewhere, maybe Chicago. Yeah, it was Chicago. And they had these different displays, of course, that were contradictory. And she was, there's like a little thing where you could sit and listen to a lecture on Origin of Species. And so Sophia was sitting there listening to it, and my mother-in-law walked up and asked her something about it, and Sophia turned and just started to explain everything to her. And I was like, oh, she learned something. Yeah, the Natural History Museum had a great display about the dinosaurs were wiped out by worldwide catastrophe. And then over here, you can tell what the temperature of the Earth was 400 billion years ago because it's never changed. It's been constant the entire time. Problem. It wasn't the same if we have worldwide cataclysmic activity at this display, then it wasn't the same. And if it was the same, then you don't have this. You can't have both. They were in the same room. Anyway, that's it. Okay, that's the end of the aside. All right, so he's quoting from Origin, wrong person. He's quoting from Darwin. And this is what Darwin says, okay, in Origin of Species. As many more individuals of each species are born than can possibly survive, and this is a little bit older English, and as consequently, there is a frequent recurring struggle for existence. So in other words, if you have too many animals living in an area and there's not enough food, okay, they're going to fight with each other for the food. There's going to be a struggle for existence. Some of them are going to die because they're not going to get the food. We shall then see how natural selection, and Darwin capitalizes it in the older English fashion, natural selection almost inevitably causes much extinction of the less improved forms of life. So, in other words, you have a bunch of animals who are living in one area. There's not enough food for all of them. Some of them are going to die off, extinction. Some of those are going to die off so that the other ones can survive. The ones that die off, he asserts, he has no evidence for it, he is asserting, are the less improved forms of life. In other words, like if there's cinnamon rolls out there, there's only one left, and Pastor and I run out there to get it, who's going to win in a battle for the cinnamon roll? It's not likely to be me. Okay. I won't answer that question. I could have some advantages on me that would allow me to get to that. So the idea is the stronger one survives, and or in that case maybe just the smarter one survives. I don't know. And you get to the next. Okay, so we go on with the quotation. This is Darwin speaking again. I have called this principle by which each slight variation, if useful, is preserved by the term natural selection in order to mark its relation to man's power of selection. So natural selection is when man's not involved and one species wins out over another one, nature is the one that's doing this. Not like man who's working with animals, like animal husbandry, to domesticate stock, right? So if I'm working with livestock and I've got a closed pen system, I'm the one who's looking for the weaker ones and the ones who are the healthier ones. And I'm going to take the healthier ones and breed those. I'm not going to take the sickly ones and breed them. All right, so he's talking about natural selection. So man is not involved. But the expression often used by Mr. Herbert Spencer of the survival of the fittest, so Herbert Spencer uses the phrase survival of the fittest, which you probably heard, is more accurate and is sometimes equally convenient. So he's saying survival of the fittest might actually be a better phrase to use than natural selection. The fittest survive, and it's actually a little more passive. It's, again, you're giving nature some kind of work to do in this case. All right, so if you believe this is true, and you believe that humans are simply animals, then what do you do in certain situations where humans are the animals that you're talking about? Quote unquote animals that you're talking about. So I'm trying to get you to think from a worldview that might actually be foreign to you at this point in time. And that's from Darwin's perspective, okay? What do you do with humans if you think that you have too many humans living in one place for the sake of then possibly for the struggle for existence? All right. Now, I'll bring in an example to maybe help with the example that we brought in. All right, here's Bill Gates. Origin of Species was published in 1869, I think, or 1859. It's either 59 or 69. Bill Gates, 2018. This is what Bill Gates said. Someone asked him this question. And he says, as we make the world healthier, this is the question that was asked to Bill Gates. Is the population going to get so big that feeding everybody and maintaining the environment is going to be impossible? And so Bill Gates, as you might have known, he's the one who's created Windows operating systems for computers, made a lot of money. He and his wife, or she's now his ex-wife, when they were married, they started a foundation, and their goal with the foundation was to spend a lot of money helping third world countries. Okay, in everything, but basically around health issues. So what people don't realize is that he's also very influential in developing a particular kind of toilet to use in the jungle. But anyway, that's beside the point. But it's all for health reasons. All right, so here's the question that was asked him in 2018, and he responded by saying, Melinda, that's his wife, ex-wife, and they were married in 2018. Melinda and I wondered whether providing new medicines and keeping children alive would that create more of a population problem? Okay, so he's trying to help develop third world countries who have so much disease that so many people are dying from the disease. Well, if we can help them avoid the disease or help them with medicines and doctors so that they don't die from the disease, doesn't that sound like a good thing? Not to Bill Gates.
Well, those are question marks. They're not exclamation points.
Bill Gates goes on to say, yeah, no, you're right. But Bill Gates he's well known for this, and this is just one article that he's written. But he says in this, it's actually a little 2-minute video that he put together. And so he does go through this diagram. He says, but now 11 billion people is still a lot. Now he's showing a graph of the human population by 2100. We'll hit 11 billion. But the good news is that the faster we improve health, the faster family size goes down. In other words, people stop having children. And so we can feel great about saving those lives. There are other lives, though, that he doesn't feel great about saving. So in other words, when you're in a third world country, why do you have a lot of children? There was a time when Western Minnesota was like a third world country and there were lots of children. Why do you have lots of children?
You expect many of them not to live to adulthood.
Yeah, you expect a lot of them to die. Okay, disease, famine, natural calamities, wars, whatever. You have a lot of children because one, you need the help, and then two, most of them aren't going to live. Or some of them, anyway, some percentage are not going to live. So Bill Gates is helping these third world countries who have large families, and he's afraid that if he does that, then we'll have too many people on the earth given the resources that we have to help them and to maintain the do I have the quote here? Oh, I don't have the quote here. And to maintain the environment. Yeah, I didn't get that quote.
So is he basically saying, is he asking the question, is it a good thing to save lives with medicine only to see them starve? Is that sort of what he's doing?
Right. So if you save lives, but then you don't have enough food for them, then they're going to die anyway. So it's better not to save their lives. It's better to have them die, and not try to help them in any way. Now, of course, Elon Musk, who is supposedly the smartest and the wealthiest man alive, doesn't believe that overpopulation is an issue. But Bill Gates certainly does. And Bill Gates would love to see our population decrease. As human beings, our population should decrease. So, yeah, we're talking about, basically, if you think of it very simply, food versus a number of people to eat. It's kind of like if we all go to Stoneberg's next, Sunday, and you show up and you're last in line and there's no hamburgers left. That's it. You go hungry. There's too many people showed up. Yeah, so get there early. The strong will survive. The strong will get there early and have food. But if you think of it this way, some people in here I think like to fish. Like there are a couple of people maybe who like to fish once in a while. There are catch limits on your fish in a given lake. We hand out in Minnesota deer tags. You can only take so many deer. Okay, so what is DNR doing with the fish and game stuff? What are they managing? Population control. If you get too many animals in the same location, there's not enough food. They'll probably start fighting each other. Some of them will just die from starvation or jump on your hood of your car in suicide. Disease spreads quicker, so you get disease in a herd if it's not cold. We even use that terminology, culling that. But if we are simply another step in the chain of evolution, then why don't we treat ourselves that same way? Right, and this is what we see actually being presented. It's presented in like dystopian literature. There's one book that when you turn 65, they have a party for you, and then off to sleep you go. And I've even said, and I hate to say it out loud, but we have a Social Security problem in the United States. We have, health insurance issues for the elderly and healthcare issues for the elderly. And in the state of Minnesota, we have issues in our nursing homes with staffing and facilities and our veterans and all of that stuff. You could fix it all if we just gave you a birthday party when you turned 65 and then took you into the back room and let you go. There would be no Social Security. There would be no expenses. And you say, well, Eric, how could you say such a thing? Most of us in here are over 65. But but this is the thinking, this is the idea that if we believe this idea is true, in our worldview, we accept it into our worldview as something that's true, then how does our culture, if enough people believe that it's true, how in our culture does it work its way out? How do we see it in our culture? And what Guliuzza is arguing is that we see it by this idea of either on the birth side or on the end of life side, beginning and end of life issues, we say, these people are taking up resources we don't want them taking anymore. They're the weak. Same with abortion. You've probably heard it said, although they don't like to market it too much, but because they can test children in the womb for Down syndrome, that if they find the child who's yet to be born, the unborn child has Down syndrome, the doctors will recommend an abortion. If you're surprised, you're pregnant, the doctor will say, unless they're in one of the Catholic hospitals, they will give it to you as an option. Oh, you're just surprised? Well, in the state of Minnesota, you can now have an abortion for no reason up until you're actually in labor. So in the state of Minnesota, there is absolutely no restrictions whatsoever, and people will ask, well, then what if the child's born and the mother changes her mind? What's the difference? Why can't they just let it die then? Pastor?
But isn't that inconsistent? I mean, Gates is consistent with his worldview, and I don't appreciate the worldview, but I can appreciate his inconsistency. But isn't euthanasia not the same thing? Because it's not natural selection, it's merely liquidation of the inconvenient.
Right.
That's not natural selection, that's a different thing.
Well, it's not natural selection in that if we're euthanizing the elderly, it's not necessarily I mean, we're deciding, so this is part of the problem, of course, who decides whose life has value and whose doesn't. And so in the case of like the youth, talking about the elderly and what do we do with the elderly, and do we give them medical care or do we not, part of that is saying, well, they're no longer part of the strong, and yet they're draining resources. And so euthanasia comes in to say, therefore, we have decided, because nature has decided, survival of the fittest, that we don't care for them anymore. So we don't care for our elderly, and we don't care for the sick in some circumstances. Other questions or thoughts? So when you read this stuff in the news and you wonder where it comes from, well, there's a lie that somebody is believing. That's the point. That's the question you want to ask yourself. What lie are these people believing that bring them to this conclusion?
Are there any lies out there?
Are there any who's? Any lies out there? Yeah. I think somebody is the father of lies, if I remember. When we're trying to establish a Christian worldview, then what we're trying to do is we're trying to weed out all of the lies that Satan